Hello there, people of the internet. How's everybody doing today? I'm doing alright. Thanks for asking. So, originally I was not going to film a video. I was just going to come out with my SKS here. This right here is a Izhevsk-made, Russian-produced SKS, chambered in 7.62x39, original 10-round magazine. I was just going to kind of, go out to a distance and do some plinking. No real goal as to what it is that I was going to be doing. But I decided to go ahead and make a video on this just because you ever have one of those moments where you're going out to do something and then you just you remember a random conversation that you had a while back, sort of based on what it is that you were doing. Well, I had a conversation with somebody a while back on how the SKS was basically as good as the AK-47 for a fraction of the cost, because you could have aftermarket external magazines that you could put in this thing, for standard capacity 30-round magazines. Well, I guess for the SKS it would be considered high capacity, but 30-round magazines aftermarket, you could throw them onto the SKS, and then the SKS, for all intents and purposes, will do exactly the same thing as the AK-47. And I just kind of looked at the guy and I was like, yeah, if you ignore the reliability of the magazines that are, aftermarket for the SKS, and if you ignore the actual mechanical functionality of the way the gun physically works, and if you ignore the fact that you can't throw any optics or anything on this thing, and you ignore the, the weight and the length of this rifle, and the way the safety mechanism works, and the way the trigger is, and how much more difficult it is to maintain and disassemble, and how much smaller and more intricate the parts are. And if you ignore basically everything about the rifle other than the fact that it lobs 7.62x39 downrange, then yeah, it is basically as good as the AK-47. And while I was thinking about the conversation that I was having with that guy about that particular matter, I remembered another conversation that I had with somebody about why I don't use bigger magazines than the ones I actually do use. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, I'm poor. I work for a living. I'm trying to run a gun channel. I burn a lot of ammunition, and I gotta space out the ammunition consumption that I do. As a result, I normally stick like 10 rounds inside of my magazines, even if they're, 30-round capacity magazines. So he specifically asked me why I don't use drum magazines. And he's like, yeah, you could put a lot of rounds downrange very, very quickly with that thing. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't really want to put a lot of rounds downrange very, very quickly. I'm trying to space my round count apart and get maybe once the channel grows, I'll be able to afford to just mag dump like that. But 10-round magazines, those are typically my normal go-to amounts whenever it comes to showing off whatever it is I'm showing off, or talking about whatever it is that I'm talking about. Another very, very big thing is cost. Drum magazines, they cost a lot. 75-round drum for the AK-47 is what, around $75 for a half-decent one that will be even remotely semi-reliable, whereas I could get myself, 30, 60, 90 rounds worth of magazines, standard capacity magazines, for like $8 a mag for, standard AK mags. Way, way more cost-effective to get, 3 standard capacity magazines totaling 90 rounds than one single drum mag. Not only that, but transportation of those, banana mags for your AK is going to be way, way easier than transportation of those drum mags. Anyone who's ever tried to carry around some of those drum mags knows just how unbelievably annoying and difficult it is. And anyone who's tried reloading with drum mags knows just how cumbersome and annoying it is. You can reload standard capacity magazines way easier than you can drum magazines, depending on the platform that it is you're running. In some platforms, it's not as big of a gap and as big of a deal, but in others, man, it is a distinctly noticeable difference in just how much more difficult it is. I know for a fact that they make 100-round magazines for the SKS, and I've considered getting one on numerous occasions, but that, the price I'd spend on that 100-round magazine would get me a lot of 7.62x39. I'd be able to make a lot of content for the same price than I would making one single video with this 100-round magazine that I probably wouldn't even be able to fill with the ammunition necessary to properly run it. So I just wanted to go ahead and point out why I don't use large drum magazines. First, I don't even, well, without repeating myself, I'm just going to go ahead and cover the highlights. I don't use the amount of ammo necessary to fill standard capacity magazines, let alone large drum magazines. I don't have the funds to be able to afford drum magazines in comparison to the practicality of being able to get way more ammunition transport capabilities in a standard magazine for the same price, or the amount of standard capacity magazines for the same price that I would get in comparison to just one single drum magazine. And then whatever the last point was that I talked about, I have decided that I'm going to go ahead and run a full magazine of 7.62 by 39 ammunition through this SKS, just basically for fun. Let me go ahead and put some targets out there so I have something to actually shoot at. So did you know that the SKS is actually capable of holding 11 rounds, not 10? If I were to push this round down, I can load the bolt onto an empty chamber, and that means I could have one in the chamber along with a full 10 round standard capacity magazine. So I just find that I find that to be a little bit of a cool, you know, side excerpt that I noticed the other day. The fact that if I felt like it, I could load 11 rounds into the SKS. That's not something that I really think about, but that's something that I came across. Same as you could load 6 rounds into a bolt action Mauser, but, ooh, that was fun. But, as I'm sure basically everyone watching this already knows, the stripper clips would only hold 10 rounds for the SKS and 5 rounds for the Mauser, so you'd have to have like an extra one in your pocket. You know, I shot this bowling pin earlier with some 223, and they did not go through the bowling pin. 7.62 by 39 is just absolutely punching right through. I'm not surprised. That poor bowling pin has been through so much. Now, personally, I cannot wait to get big enough to be able to afford some of these other things that these other big gun tubers are doing. Like whenever we have somebody go out and just like absolutely mow down the landscape of an area with a minigun or something, and they just launch like 1,000 rounds of brass case 308 downrange. I'm like, that's like a week's worth of pay for me. And I'm just like, yeah, boy oh boy, I sure am glad that I can't afford to do that. Originally, I missed the days where the SKS was not a lot of money to get your hands on one. You used to be able to pick these up for like under $100 any day of the week. Even after the Mosin Nagant started rising in price, these right here were very cheap and very readily available. You could buy them by the crate. I remember seeing on Classic Firearms, they had crates of these things for like $60 a piece, and I very much regret not buying an entire crate of these things at the time period. Of course, I think during that time I was still just a little bit too young to be able to legally buy firearms. And here in the state of Florida, with the new law that had passed not too terribly long ago, you now have to be 21 to buy both handgun, rifle, shotgun, basically any kind of firearm. But this isn't a law political video. This is me talking about drum magazines and why I decide not to use them. So I'm sure a lot of people out there can understand why I decide not to roll with drum magazines. The biggest thing is cost and my inability to be able to fill them. Anyway, folks, thanks for watching. Not a whole lot of content on this one. It's going to be kind of a short-ish video, but boy oh boy, it was still a good time. Subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of stuff. Like the video if you like the video, and description down below has a link to all sorts of different goodies. That being said, I think I'm going to wander out to a distance and put some rounds down range and just see how close I can get the group in with this SKS, but I don't have camera B out here, and I don't have a camera stand to be able to set my camera up, so you guys aren't going to be able to watch that one. This is just me having fun plinking at my range at this point. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day, and like I said, thanks for watching.
Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.